My ankle. My ankle was on Tracy.
Warning. Second warning, 49.
Come on, Harkness. Just keep it moving. One foot in front of the other. You got this. I'm gonna go. No.
He failed to maintain a speed of 3 miles per hour, and the unlucky man was mercilessly shot in the head by a soldier. Yet, as his body fell to the ground, not a single companion turned back to look, because this was a walking competition of death, where every participant had to eat while walking, and even relieve themselves on the move. Anyone who fell behind would be executed by the soldiers following close behind. The reward for surviving such a brutal game was not only a huge sum of money, but also the fulfillment of one personal wish by the government. This is the newly released 2025 thriller, The Long Walk. In another parallel version of the 20th century, America was plagued by years of civil war, sinking into an era of economic stagnation and social collapse. To restore public confidence, the ruling government created an annual event called The Long Walk, designed to awaken the patriotic and working spirit of the impoverished masses. Each year, the organizers invite 3 to 5 people from across the U.S. states, forming a 50-person team to compete. The rules were simple. Just keep walking forward at the required pace, and whoever reached the finish line would be declared the winner. The victor would receive a massive cash prize and one granted wish. Once the event began, it became the most popular spectacle in America. But when the participants arrived at the venue full of excitement, they quickly realized that the so-called competition was nothing like they had imagined. Once the walk started, there was no stopping until the finish line. Only the winner would survive. And for those eliminated, a bullet to the head awaited. Even with death as the price of failure, the promise of glory and fortune continued to attract countless new participants. In the small town of Rocks, Texas, a young man named Ray received an invitation from the organizers. According to the rules, anyone selected could withdraw up to 3 days before the event. But Ray secretly hid his invitation and only revealed it after the deadline had passed. When his mother, Ginny, learned that her son had been chosen, her face filled with fear and despair. Although she had never joined the competition herself, she had witnessed it before, and she knew her son's chances of winning were very slim. Ray, however, thought differently. He firmly believed he could make it to the end, but there was another reason why he hid the invitation from his mother. Ever since the country's economy had collapsed, their family had lived in constant hardship, barely surviving on temporary jobs. When his father was still alive, the 4 of them could scrape by, but after his death, things only grew worse. Now, even though they worked day and night, they could barely keep food on the table. With no future in sight, Ray felt that the only way to change his fate was to join the competition. But Ginny still refused. She begged him to withdraw, yet Ray would not listen. Seeing her stubborn son, Ginny was both worried and powerless. Even worse, if a participant failed to arrive at the venue on time and didn't submit a withdrawal request beforehand, they would be considered eliminated. With no other choice, Ginny had to take her son to the competition herself. Seeing his anxious mother, Ray felt reluctant to leave, but stood by his decision. After packing everything he needed, he bid his mother a heartfelt farewell.
I know. It's gonna be okay. It's gonna be okay. You go okay.
While waiting for inspection, Ray met Pete. Though strangers, a few simple words quickly turned them into friends. During their chat, Ray learned that Pete came from a neighboring state. As they talked, other contestants began arriving at the venue one after another. Groups formed quickly, chatting and laughing, with one cheerful guy even sharing his cookies with everyone. Ray soon realized that they were all just ordinary people from poor backgrounds, each desperate to win fame and escape poverty. They all appeared relaxed, but deep down, everyone was sizing each other up. Then, a jeep slowly rolled in from the distance. Standing atop it was the Major, the referee for this year's competition, responsible for enforcing the rules. Once everyone had gathered, soldiers handed out number tags and wristwatches. The tag represented their identity, while the watch tracked speed and distance. The Major then began to announce the rules of the game. The rule was simple: keep walking forward without stopping. But surviving until the end was far from easy. Everyone had to maintain a speed of no less than 3 miles per hour. If they slowed down, they'd receive a yellow card warning. They had 10 seconds to increase their pace. If they failed, they'd receive a second warning. Leaving the road would also result in a warning. 3 yellow cards meant elimination. There was, however, a small mercy. Maintaining the correct speed for an hour could remove 1 yellow card. The entire event would be broadcast live, and all food and water would be provided by the organizers. Throughout the walk, no one could rest or stop. They had to eat, drink, and even relieve themselves while walking. As for where the finish line lay, not even the Major knew. Their only task was to keep walking forward.
Boys, who said I said, who's ready to win?
Though the participants had mentally prepared themselves, as the moment approached, fear began to creep in. But now, there was no turning back. As the gunshot rang out, the deadly march began. At first, the atmosphere on the field was calm, and all the participants were trying to adjust their rhythm to maintain their best condition. But soon, that peaceful atmosphere was broken by a few talkative contestants. They started chatting, talking about things related to the race. One of them even tried to cheer everyone up, saying that since the entire event was being broadcast live, there were probably hundreds of millions of people watching them on TV right now. Hearing that, Ray turned around to take a look, but when he found the so-called camera, he realized it was hidden inside the barrel of a gun. The reason for such a strange camera placement was that the organizers wanted to capture the moment when eliminated participants were shot. Seeing the soldiers behind them, the atmosphere immediately turned heavy again. Before long, the group reached the 5-mile mark. Because everyone's stamina was still good, and since they had all undergone training before the competition and knew how to control their pace, no one had yet received a warning. But just as they were guessing who might trigger the first warning, a sharp beeping sound echoed through the crowd. Ray turned around and saw that the warning was for a man named Stebbins. They had talked before the race, and Ray remembered that Stebbins seemed to be in good shape, so how could he be the first to get a warning? While Ray was wondering, Pete walked over and explained. It turned out that Stebbins had been testing the limits of the race's minimum speed to better adjust his own rhythm. Just as Pete predicted, soon others in the group began to receive warnings as well. They too were testing their limits. Before long, the formation started to shift. Some of the participants who had been in the front gradually fell behind, creating distance from the main group. Ray, Pete, and a few others kept their pace steady, walking at the front and chatting along the way. Pete began talking about the true origin of the race. It turned out this event wasn't created by the government to boost the economy at all, but rather by the wealthy elite as a form of entertainment to pass the time. Before the race even began, the participants' numbers had already been distributed to the tables of rich spectators. The wealthy were placing bets, predicting who would win. It was said that the total amount of the wagers was hundreds of times greater than the actual prize money. Although many found this disgusting, none of the participants openly complained. After all, it was only because of the money from the rich that the organizers were able to offer a reward at all. It was like throwing a single piece of bread into a crowd of starving people. If you wanted to eat it, you had to play by the rules. Even though everyone knew they might not get the bread, they still wanted to try. Having company made the long walk less boring, and the journey didn't feel as exhausting. Seeing how lively the group ahead was, contestant number 49, Richard, also joined in. He said he didn't enter the race for the prize money, but to turn his experience into a book and publish it afterward. But hearing that, the others didn't think much of his plan. If he actually won, the prize money would be worth far more than any book royalties, but if he lost, he wouldn't even live to write the book. As everyone talked about their dreams and past lives, another warning sound broke the chatter. Ray looked up and saw that contestant number 7, Curly, had a leg cramp. Because he was walking at the minimum pace, Curly quickly received 2 warnings in a row. Ray didn't just stand by, he reached out to help Curly. With Ray's support, Curly managed to find his rhythm again. But just as Ray let go, Curly collapsed, unable to endure the strain any longer.
Curly, come on. Come on, Curly, come on. Number 7. Get up, kid. Get up, youngin. Get up. It's there. That fucking
As Curly lay lifeless on the road, the once cheerful crowd fell into complete silence, each fearing they would be the next to fall. Fortunately, there were no more eliminations over the next 10 miles, and the group slowly began to relax again. Pete, especially, never stopped talking the whole way. When he saw people by the roadside holding signs and cheering them on, he even cracked jokes that made everyone laugh. But just as the laughter reached its peak, tragedy struck again. Contestant number 1 suddenly began foaming at the mouth, then collapsed to the ground. He was eliminated instantly. The mood once again turned heavy, the tension swallowing whatever joy had returned. After crossing a wide plain, the participants reached a massive dam. It was afternoon, and the sunlight reflected off the water, creating a dazzling golden lake. The sudden beauty of the scene briefly lifted everyone's spirits, and the group finally began to feel a little lighter again. Just when everyone thought no more accidents would happen, a contestant at the front of the line suddenly got into an argument with another participant named Gary. Gary had only wanted to start a conversation, but his approach was awkward, and the two quickly began to quarrel. Because of the argument, Rank lost his rhythm, and tragedy followed. He stumbled and fell, unable to get up in time, and after receiving 3 warnings, he was shot on the spot. Realizing that someone was intentionally stirring up trouble, The others quickly understood that Gary had provoked Rank on purpose to get him eliminated. The rest of the group turned on Gary, shouting and accusing him of being a disgusting person. Hearing one person speak up, others joined in as well. But the accusations didn't last long because no one wanted to waste their energy on something like this. Gary himself was filled with guilt. He hadn't meant to cause trouble. He truly just wanted to talk, but somehow he ended up enraging Rank. Seeing Gary slap himself in remorse, the others who had been furious moments ago stopped scolding him. The race soon reached the 35-mile mark. Contestant number 45, Ronald, suddenly had a stomach problem. He wanted to stop to relieve himself, but the 10-second limit was far too short. To avoid elimination, he had no choice but to keep walking while doing it, filling the air with an unbearable stench. At first, Ronald thought it was just an upset stomach, but even after he was done, the pain didn't stop. Instead, his abdomen cramped violently. The agony made it impossible for him to continue, and after 3 warnings, he was eliminated. By evening, the participants had reached 35 miles, and darkness slowly began to fall. During that time, more than a dozen contestants had been eliminated for various reasons, leaving only about 30 of the original 50. Even though there were still many people around, everyone knew that most of them wouldn't survive the night. Midnight soon arrived, and after walking the entire day, everyone was exhausted and sleepy. To stay awake, some tried drinking water or eating to regain energy. But the fatigue from such a long journey was not something food could fix. A few unlucky contestants couldn't hold on any longer and were eliminated. At the front of the group, Ray and Pete were still pushing forward. They talked about everything, from astronomy to geography, from their families to the scandals of their neighbors. Although the conversation never stopped, both Ray and Pete were utterly drained. Just as Ray was about to fall asleep on his feet, a gunshot echoed from behind. He turned around and saw another contestant fall to the ground. The sound of the gun snapped the tired walkers out of their daze, dragging them back to the reality of death. But before long, they realized that even fear could grow numb under such extreme conditions. Gunshots continued to ring out across the line, and one by one, people collapsed to the ground. No one knew how much time had passed when Ray finally saw a faint trace of white light on the horizon. After a night of constant eliminations, the once 50-strong team had been reduced to just over 20 people. Having left the valley, they arrived at the edge of a city, but still, there was no sign of a finish line. Ray felt his strength fading. He began to regret not listening to his mother's warnings and insisting on joining the race. But what good was regret now? Pete noticed that something was wrong with Ray. Although they were technically rivals, the bond they had built along the way had already turned them into close friends. Hearing Pete's comforting words, Ray slowly calmed down. He adjusted his pace and forced himself not to fall behind. Thanks to Pete's encouragement, they managed to stay at the front of the line. They supported and motivated each other, pushing on for another 10 miles. By the time they reached the 67-mile mark, only 18 contestants remained. After walking all night, everyone was completely worn out, and even the talkative Pete had fallen mostly silent. Then, just as the group trudged on in silence, a sharp beeping sound broke through the air.
Hey, what's on tricks?
Warning. Second warning, 49.
Come on, heart this. Just keep it moving. 1 foot in front of the other. You got this. I'm gonna go up.
Seeing Richard lying on the ground, they were shocked, but their faces showed no expression. After witnessing so many deaths in a single day, they had grown numb to it. But as Ray fell into despair, Pete told him that the real competition was only just beginning, because those who had survived this far were the best of the best. Sure enough, over the next 33 miles, not a single person was eliminated, and the atmosphere within the group became extremely tense. Pete tried to start a conversation, but when he opened his mouth, he didn't even know what to say anymore. Then, out of nowhere, another tragedy struck. At the 100-mile mark, one contestant suddenly broke away from the line, attempting to hide behind a structure to escape the soldiers' view. But such foolish tricks were useless against alert soldiers. It was a death wish. As the man fell, Ray and Pete froze in disbelief. The remaining contestants began to question everything. Who had designed such a cruel contest, and why did elimination have to mean death? Once one person spoke up, the others joined in. They started cursing the soldiers and the organizers behind them. But before long, even their anger faded, leaving only silence and exhaustion. Passing through the small town, the team arrived at a large bridge. The topic shifted from cursing the organizers to what they would do with the prize money if they won. Some said they wanted to go to a massage parlor to relax, while others dreamed of enjoying a big meal. Just as everyone was imagining their bright future, Gary, who had been silent since the previous argument, suddenly joined the conversation.
Ain't these supposed to be your best friends? They shut up, killer. Huh? Go your own circle, man. Hey, gotta be careful saying the kind of stuff out loud, right?
Although there had been tension before, his unexpected remarks lightened the mood, and laughter gradually replaced the gloom. The race soon reached the 130-mile mark. Thunder roared across the sky, and heavy rain began to pour down. Ray and Pete teamed up, taking turns supporting each other so they could rest while still walking. Though their legs never stopped, this small trick gave them a few precious moments of relief. Seeing that the referee didn't issue any warnings, other participants began to copy them. After another long night, the 17 remaining contestants had been reduced to 12. Halfway through, Pete suddenly stopped walking. Ray thought Pete had reached his limit, but when he turned around, he saw him lowering his pants to relieve himself right there on the road. Even after walking for 3 days straight, Pete's timing was impeccable. Every time the 10-second countdown hit 9, he would stand up just in time, and before the next warning reset, he would squat again. Repeating this over and over, Pete not only emptied his stomach but also managed to rest for a while each time. Another contestant tried to imitate him, but the moment he squatted down, he couldn't get back up and was eliminated. Seeing Pete's clever survival trick, the others couldn't help but look at him with admiration. After walking another 5 miles, the discussion turned again to what they would do if they won. Ray joined in, sharing his own wish with Pete. To Pete's surprise, Ray's wish was to kill the Major. It turned out that years of civil war had led to absurd laws across America. People weren't allowed to talk about certain topics, and anyone who did would be arrested. Ray's father had spoken out in frustration one day and was taken away by the enforcement team. The leader of that team was none other than the Major. Ray's father and the Major had once been good friends, and if he had accepted punishment quietly, he would have been imprisoned for only a few years. But Ray's father refused to live in fear. He stood before everyone and shouted everything he had been forbidden to say. As a result, tragedy struck. The Major shot him dead. That act of loyalty earned the Major merit and secured him the position of referee for the long walk. Ray had always wanted to challenge the system, but he knew deep down that this wasn't just his burden to bear, it was the burden of their entire generation. Yet because of fear and silence, everyone chose to do nothing. Ray didn't see himself as a hero and didn't care about changing the rules. He just wanted to avenge his father. Hearing Ray's story, Pete felt a deep sadness. He wanted to say something, but the words never came out. By the third evening, the participants had walked more than 200 miles. Several more were eliminated, leaving only 6 contestants on the field. Though they were still moving, they were all at their breaking point. To avoid falling behind, the survivors held on to one another, taking turns resting as they walked. But those brief moments of rest did nothing to ease the pain in their legs. Another day and night passed, and the 6 survivors were still holding on. Just as everyone wondered who would fall next, Gary suddenly ran ahead and stopped. Before anyone could react, he took his own life. The already grim mood grew even heavier. Another day passed, and they had walked 260 miles. Pete never expected that he could make it this far. After yet another sleepless night, only 5 contestants remained as they entered the city. Along the roadside, Ray suddenly saw his mother. Her appearance shattered his focus. Even though he knew he might be eliminated, Ray still wanted to run to her and hold his mother one last time, because he didn't know if he would ever see her again. Fortunately, Pete grabbed him in time. If Ray had stepped out of line, he would have been disqualified immediately. Realizing his mistake, Ray quickly pulled himself together and forced his body back into rhythm. The race reached the 300-mile mark. Though the survivors were still pushing forward, they all knew the end was near. Sure enough, Kali finally broke down. He grabbed a soldier's gun, trying to fight back and buy everyone a moment to rest. But after walking for so long, his body had no strength left. Before he could do anything, the Major raised his weapon and shot him. The remaining 4 dared not stop and kept moving forward. When they reached 350 miles, Arthur could go no further. Ray and Pete tried to encourage him to hold on, but Arthur didn't want to drag them down. After Arthur's elimination, only Ray, Pete, and Stebbins remained. Crossing through the valley, they reached a massive bridge spanning the sea. Seeing the 2 still holding strong, Stebbins knew he couldn't continue. He said goodbye and gave up. As the gunshot rang out behind him, Ray's will began to crumble. Pete urged him to keep going. The finish line was close. He could see people in the distance. But Ray knew the truth. As long as there were 2 contestants left, there would never be a finish line, because this race could have only one winner. Hearing that, Pete stopped in his tracks. He had always believed that reaching the end meant victory, but now, realizing there was no end, he broke down completely. He was an orphan, raised without parents, and the only reason he joined the race was to find a dignified way to die. Knowing Ray still had a mother waiting for him, Pete decided to give up. Ray understood his friend's sacrifice, but winning this way would haunt him forever. After Ray's pleading, Pete stood up again, but just as he took a few steps forward, a gunshot echoed behind him. Ray could no longer hold on. He had wanted victory, but he didn't want to live in a world like this. A world without tomorrow, without hope. So when Pete stood up, Ray chose to stop. With Ray's elimination, the final result was decided. Seeing the cheering crowd, Pete was completely stunned. As he burst into tears, the host walked toward him. According to the rules, he would receive a huge cash prize and one granted wish. When asked what he wanted, Pete gave his answer. He turned his weapon on the Major. The crowd didn't react with shock. On the contrary, they cheered, because to them, it didn't matter who died. As Pete looked at the cheering crowd by the roadside, his mind went blank. He didn't keep the prize money for himself. Instead, he gave it all to the families of the fallen contestants. And that was the story of The Long Walk, the latest 2025 thriller masterpiece. So, if such a competition existed in real life, would you take part in it? How far do you think you could go? Well, that's all for today.